What material did the people of Mesopotamia mainly use to make everyday objects? Clay. What did the people of Mesopotamia believe the shape of the earth was? A flat earth. What was the representative writing material made from reeds in Egyptian civilization? Papyrus. In the Four Symbols tradition, what is the animal that guards the north, depicted as a combination of a turtle and a snake, called? Xuan Wu. Why did the Zhou dynasty advance the doctrine of the mandate of heaven? To justify their conquest of the Shang dynasty. What material was used to make jipai, the first currency in ancient China? Shells. How did the legacy of Babylonia influence later generations? It contributed to the development of legal and administrative systems. What resource was used to make Assyria's iron weapons? Iron ore. How were the walls of Assyrian royal palaces decorated? With reliefs and wall paintings. Which animal played an important role in sacred rituals and sacrifices in the Minoan civilization? The bull. What type of artwork from ancient Cretan civilization is characterized by women's elaborate clothing and striking poses? Statues of the snake goddess. Why have Mycenaean pottery and crafts been found in many distant regions? Because of its extensive trade network. Within the social structure, what roles did the kings and nobles fulfill in the Mycenaean civilization? Administrative and military leadership. In the economy of ancient Cretan civilization, what was one of the most important industries? Pottery production and the textile industry. In the religious beliefs of the Minoan civilization, which goddess was regarded as most important? The earth goddess. What technological developments enabled the Minoan civilization to expand its sea-based trade? Navigation techniques and shipbuilding. In which ancient city of the Mycenaean civilization is the so-called Lion Gate located? Mycenae. In ancient Greece, what was the public square where citizens gathered for political and commercial activities? The Agora. What is the name of the mountain where, according to tradition, weak infants were abandoned in Sparta? Mount Taygetus. In Sparta, what was the state-run military education system for boys called? The Agoge. Which island was the center of the Minoan civilization and the site of the Palace of Knossos? Crete Island. Which musician descended into the underworld to retrieve his deceased wife? Orpheus. In Sparta, what term referred to state-controlled education? Paideia. Which philosopher of the Cynic school practiced an extreme form of asceticism? Diogenes. What was the building in Athens where public officials gathered to conduct state business? The Prytaneum. In ancient Athens, which social group was responsible for labor and domestic work? Slaves. What obligation did Athenian citizens bear in order to support the running of the state? Paying taxes. In Athens, what was the gathering where citizens met to discuss state policies? The Citizens' Assembly. What was the war in Greece fought under the leadership of Sparta and Athens? The Peloponnesian War. In which battle did Greece win its final victory over Persia? Battle of Plataea. After the Battle of Thermopylae, which city did Xerxes I occupy? Athens. What was the original purpose of the Delian League? To defend against Persian attacks. Why was Sparta the strongest side in the Peloponnesian War? Its powerful land forces. In the Battle of Marathon, which Greek general attacked before the Persian cavalry could return? Miltiades. Which king in the Persian Empire organized an extensive tax system? Darius I. What script developed by the Phoenicians became the origin of the alphabet? The Phoenician script. What was the most important weapon used by the Hittite army in battle? Light chariots. After Rome destroyed Carthage, what did they famously spread over the land to make farming impossible, according to later tradition? Salt. What military system did Rome develop in order to learn from and overcome Hannibal tactics? Reformed legionary tactics. In ancient Persia, what was used to transmit the king's orders quickly? The royal road and a courier system. After conquering Babylon, what important decree did Cyrus II issue concerning the Jews? The liberation of the Jews from the Babylonian captivity. Before he founded the Persian Empire, which kingdom did Cyrus II rule? The Kingdom of Anshan. In which year did Cambyses II die? Year 522 BC. Before launching his eastern campaigns, which kingdom did Alexander the Great rule? The Kingdom of Macedonia. What was the greatest historical legacy left by Alexander the Great? The spread of Hellenistic culture. Which king built Persepolis? Darius I. What was the first battle that Crown Prince Alexander personally commanded? The Battle of Chaeronea. What were the main subjects that Crown Prince Alexander studied in Macedonia? Philosophy, military strategy, and politics. What words did Alexander the Great reportedly speak about his successor just before his death? to the strongest one. In which battle in India did Alexander the Great have to cross a great river? The Battle of Hydaspes. According to Diogenes, humans should live like what kind of animal? Like a dog, in harmony with nature. What role did the Library of Alexandria play? It served as the center of Hellenistic learning and culture. What was the first Buddha image sculpted in Gandharan art, and in which period was it created? A statue of Shakyamuni Buddha, created around the 1st–2nd centuries. What concept lay at the ideological center of Hebraism? Theocentrism, or belief in the one God. Which 19th-century Western thinker systematically discussed the differences between Hellenism and Hebraism? Matthew Arnold. What was the main political system of Sparta in ancient Greece? Oligarchy. Who were the 3 major philosophers who led the golden age of ancient Greek philosophy? Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Who was the leader that rebuilt the temple after the Babylonian captivity in ancient Israel? Zerubbabel. After King Solomon, into which 2 kingdoms was the Hebrew kingdom divided, and what were their names? The northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. What was the main reason why Phoenician civilization was able to prosper through maritime trade? Their advanced shipbuilding and navigation skills. In which battle did Hannibal win his greatest victory? Battle of Cannae. What military system did Rome develop in order to learn from and overcome Hannibal's tactics? Reformed legionary tactics. In ancient China, which symbolic color could only the emperor use? Yellow. What ritual did the ancient Aztec civilization frequently perform to please the sun god? Human sacrifice. What is the main reason that Herodotus' historical accounts are often criticized? Inclusion of exaggerated stories and legends. What are the 3 classes of the ideal state proposed by Plato? Rulers, guardians, and workers. At what place was the famous maxim, "Know yourself," associated with Socrates inscribed? Delphi Temple. What were the large mansions owned by wealthy Roman aristocrats called? Villas. In the late Roman Empire, who was the first emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire? Arcadius. What was the important political body that assisted the king during the Roman kingdom period? The Senate. In which year did the Roman Republic end and the Roman Empire begin? (27 BC). Among the road networks developed by the early emperors of the Roman Empire, which was the most important road? Appian Way. In the early Roman Empire, what was the greatest external diplomatic threat? defending the frontiers against the Germanic tribes. After Caesar's assassination, which three men formed the Second Triumvirate? Octavian, Antony and Lepidus. In the Roman Republic, which political body represented the aristocratic class? The Senate. Which great power did Rome fight in the Punic Wars? Carthage. In which year did the Seleucid dynasty finally collapse? '63 BC. In which year did the Ptolemaic dynasty fall and Egypt become a Roman province? '30 BC. What did Caesar say when he was assassinated in the Senate and saw the betrayal of his friend Brutus? You too, Brutus? What was the political system of medieval Europe called? Feudalism. What did the nobles swear to the king? Loyalty. What process did a person have to go through to become a knight? Training as a squire and a knighting ceremony. What did humanism emphasize? The individual's reason and worth. Who painted the Mona Lisa? Leonardo da Vinci. Which artist painted the ceiling frescoes of The Creation of the Heavens and the Earth, commonly known as The Creation of the World, or The Creation of Adam? Michelangelo. Which family actively sponsored the arts during the Renaissance? The Medici family. As the Renaissance spread to other regions, which cities became major centers of its development? Rome, Venice and Milan. In which country did the Industrial Revolution first begin? Great Britain. What problems did workers face after machines were introduced? Harsh and poor working conditions. What kind of competition formed the background to World War I? An arms race and competition for colonies. What event led the United States to enter World War I? The sinking of the Lusitania. What system of government did Pericles in Athens develop? Democratic rule. What form of rule does Louis XIV of France represent? Absolute monarchy. What problems did cities whose populations surged during the Industrial Revolution experience? Sanitation and housing problems. What way of life did Lao Tzu's philosophy encourage people to follow? To live naturally without force or compulsion. The Byzantine Empire served as a hub linking Europe and Asia throughout the Middle Ages. For about how many years did it last? More than 1,000 years. The world-famous building now used as a mosque, Hagia Sophia, was originally constructed under which empire? The Byzantine Empire. In a feudal society, what were peasants who had obtained their freedom called? Free peasants or freemen? Which Portuguese prince helped lead the Age of Discovery? Prince Henry the Navigator. Which navigator sailed around Africa and opened a sea route to India? Vasco da Gama. Which emperor revived the Frankish kingdom and greatly contributed to the development of European culture? Charlemagne. Who was the Norman leader who extended his domain into England? William I. Which emperor ruled both Sicily and Italy and Germany while also patronizing scholarship? Frederick II. How did Renaissance art seek to portray human beings? In an idealized yet realistic manner. Why is the Renaissance sometimes called the beginning of the early modern period? Because a new worldview was formed. What hope did World War I give to people in colonial countries? The hope of independence. Why did the teachings of Confucius maintain their influence for such a long time? Because they emphasized a moral-centered education. What common question did ancient Greek philosophers ask? How should one live? What problem often arose in states where royal authority was weak? The strengthening of noble power. What problems would arise if an ancient king frequently changed the laws? Confusion among the people. Chariot racing was popular in the Byzantine era. What was the name of the huge stadium where these races were held? The Hippodrome. Constantinople was a key center of trade routes. Why was it such a strategically important city? Because it was a crucial hub linking land and sea routes. What does the Four Noble Truths, a central teaching of Buddhism, explain? Suffering and the way to overcome it. During the Han Dynasty in China, what representative product was carried to the West via the Silk Road? Silk. What were the followers of Jesus Christ called? Christians. What was a representative architectural style of medieval Europe? The Gothic style. What landholding system became the basic unit of feudal society in medieval Europe? Manorial estate system. During the Age of Discovery, in the triangular trade, to which continent did Europe forcibly send people taken from Africa for labor? America. What was the revolution in England in which the Bill of Rights limited royal power and strengthened the authority of Parliament? The Glorious Revolution. What was the name of the prominent English king who took part in the Crusades? Richard I. What kind of astronomical knowledge did ancient Egyptians use to predict the flooding season of the Nile River? Solar calendar. What school did Charlemagne of the Frankish kingdom establish to promote education? Palace School. As a result of the Crusades and increased cultural exchange between Europe and the East, which representative spice was introduced to Europe? Pepper. What is the name of the famous Eastern Roman Church whose name means holy wisdom? Hagia Sophia Cathedral. What new means of transportation in Britain's Industrial Revolution played an important role in linking cities and factories? Railways. After the Russian Revolution, what was the capital of the Soviet Union? Moscow. During World War II, which country's regime, the Nazis, led the genocide of the Jews? Germany. What is the name of the main decision-making body of the European Union, where the heads of member states meet to set policy direction? The European Council. As a result of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, what was the phenomenon called in which the rural population moved into the cities? Urbanization. After the Russian Revolution, what was the main feature of the new economic policy, NEP, led by Lenin? Partial introduction of a market economy. What is the name of the figures known as the Terracotta Army, which Qin Shi Huang of the Qin dynasty is said to have built to protect his tomb? Terracotta Army. Why did Napoleon lead his army to invade Egypt? To contain British power. Which city in Belgium is home to the headquarters of the European Union? Brussels. Which Greek playwright wrote tragic works such as Medea? Euripides. After the Crusades, what commercial activity developed in Europe as spices, textiles, and other goods from the East flowed in? Long-distance trade. In which year did Napoleon lead his army on the Russian campaign? Year 1812. During the Age of Exploration, who, backed by Spain, conquered the Aztec Empire? Hernán Cortés. Why did Germany adopt unrestricted submarine warfare during World War I? To break through the British blockade. Which Greek sculptor created works with outstanding human proportions, such as the discus thrower? Myron. What was the revival movement of classical culture that began in 14th century Italy called? The Renaissance. Who was the principal author of the United States Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson. What was the deadly epidemic that drastically reduced the population of Europe in the 14th century? Black Death. What was the economic policy during the age of absolute monarchy that encouraged exports to increase national wealth? Mercantilism. What was the extreme racial segregation policy implemented in the Republic of South Africa? Apartheid. What was the event in 1989 in which the wall that symbolized the division of East and West Germany was brought down? The fall of the Berlin Wall. What was the large fleet that Spain sent in 1588 to invade England but which was destroyed? The Spanish Armada. Which English scientist discovered the law of universal gravitation and founded calculus? Isaac Newton. Which king founded the ancient Persian Empire? Cyrus II. Which Renaissance scientist opposed the geocentric model and advocated heliocentrism? Copernicus. Among the ancient Greek city-states, which was the center of democracy and rival of Sparta? Athens. In the Renaissance period, who was the universal artist who painted works such as the Mona Lisa and The Last Supper? Leonardo da Vinci. What was the civil war in England between the Royalists and the Parliamentarians? The Puritan Revolution. Who was the last General Secretary of the Soviet Union who led its dissolution? Mikhail Gorbachev. Which region is thought to have been the birthplace of the first agricultural revolution in human history? The Fertile Crescent. In which year did Greece win the Battle of Marathon during the Persian Wars? Year 490 BC. What was the revolution in England in which James II was overthrown and Mary II and William III were invited to rule jointly? The Glorious Revolution. What was the name of the republic established in Germany after its defeat in World War I? The Weimar Republic. Which battle in the North African theater, where German forces were repelled, laid the groundwork for Allied victory? The Battle of El Alamein. Among the international military tribunals held to punish war criminals after World War II, what was the trial of Nazi German war criminals called? The Nuremberg Trials. What was the 1857 uprising in India against British rule called? Sepoy Mutiny. What was the amphibious operation that the Allies carried out against Germany during World War II? Normandy landings. What was the 1917 British declaration supporting the establishment of a Jewish national home called? Balfour Declaration. What is the name given to the African independence movements of the 1950s and 1960s? Decolonization movements. What is the Protestant church that Henry VIII of England established? Church of England. What was the name of the English queen who defeated the Spanish Armada? Elizabeth I. What was the warrior class in Japan that was abolished after the Meiji Restoration called? Samurai. What was the first Japanese city on which an atomic bomb was dropped at the end of World War II? Hiroshima. What was the 1978 summit at which Israel and Egypt signed a peace agreement? Camp David Accords. What is the name of the official single currency of the European Union, EU? Euro. Which English king was executed as a result of the English Civil War? Charles I. What was the full official name of Hitler's German Nazi Party? National Socialist German Workers' Party. In which Chinese city did the Tiananmen incident occur? Beijing. Who is known as the father of modern political science and wrote on the state, the prince and related works? Niccolò Machiavelli. What is the location famous for the failed U.S. invasion of Cuba? Bay of Pigs. Which explorer was the first European to sight the Pacific Ocean? Balboa. Which decisive battle brought about the downfall of Napoleon's French Empire? The Battle of Waterloo. What is the representative Islamic architectural monument built by the Mughal Empire in India? The Taj Mahal. Which Eastern European country established a democratic government through a democratization movement in 1989? Poland. In which city did Calvin implement his theocratic government in 16th-century Europe? Geneva. Who became the first president of Russia after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991? Boris Yeltsin. What was the name of the city that Emperor Constantine founded after moving the capital to Byzantium? Constantinople. Which emperor of the Qin dynasty ordered the large-scale construction of the Great Wall of China? Qin Shi Huangdi. Which Chinese dynasty was founded by Kublai Khan of the Mongol Empire? The Yuan dynasty. Which king during the Renaissance brought the Mona Lisa to France? Francis I. What was the event in 1789 when women in Paris marched to demand bread called? The Women's March on Versailles. What was the agreement in 1916 during the First World War in which Britain and France planned to divide the Middle East called? The Sykes-Picot Agreement. Which site in France is famous for its prehistoric cave paintings? The Lascaux Caves. What was the script of the ancient seafaring Phoenician people, known as the origin of the alphabet, called? Phoenician script. What was the name of the American inventor who created the electric light bulb and the phonograph? Thomas Edison. What is the name of the International Climate Change Agreement adopted in 1997? The Kyoto Protocol. Which French city is the primary seat of the European Parliament? Strasbourg. Which city in Asia Minor was captured by the stratagem of the wooden horse during the Trojan War? Troy. What title was borne by the leader who founded the Republic of Turkey in 1923 and pursued modernization? Ataturk. What was the Middle Eastern resource cartel that triggered the first oil crisis in 1973 and sharply raised oil prices? OPEC. Who was the scholar who published On the Origin of Species in 1859 and presented the theory of evolution? Charles Darwin. What is the collective term for the various wars that broke out in the Balkans during the breakup of Yugoslavia? Yugoslav Wars. What is the group of emerging economies that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa called? BRICS. Which Italian merchant visited China during the Yuan dynasty and wrote The Travels of Marco Polo? Marco Polo. What is the name of the U.S. stock market crash in 1929 that triggered the Great Depression? Wall Street crash. In which year was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, founded? Year 1949. Thank you for watching until the end. We'd love to hear your feedback and historical insights in the comments. Your support helps us create even more history quizzes. Let's keep exploring together.